The alley turned as if the city itself were testing her. A low ribbon of water dragged through the gutter, reflecting gaslight like a wound that would not close. Olivia Ward tightened the strap of her boot with the heel of her palm and kept walking. The leather hid the letter like a second pulse. She could feel the paper's edge under her sole every step. A tiny, traitorous weight that measured the distance between a promise and a reckoning. Behind her, the footsteps continued to walk, not hurry. The sound was precise, the cadence of someone who moved by intention rather than by fear. Charleston had taught her to read a footfall the way a reader could tell an accent from a page, each one a sentence about the man who made it. These footsteps read like composed sentences, confidence, authority, a hand used to being obeyed. Olivia did not turn. Turning would be an admission. So she listened. The scrape of a boot over wet cobblestone, the whisper of fabric over lap, a faint catch in breath only when the lane narrowed and he matched her pace without needing to. She mapped the man by sound, not a drunk, not a courier, not a brawler hungry for coin. This man walked like a man who believed the night belonged to him. She crossed the street and kept her shoulders bent into the raincoat, shielding the hidden weight. A cart rattled by, horses wiping their flanks with the slow patience of beasts that had been fed at the cost of someone else's silence. A child called in the distance, a single note that sounded like innocence, stitched improperly to time. And then the call cut. Night reclaimed the city. She reached the mouth of a narrower lane where the light fell thin and the shadows waited with patient teeth. The footsteps paused half a block back as if the man measured whether she would turn or continue. She did not choose either. She chose the route that meant arriving sooner. The man finally spoke as she stepped beneath a shuttered storefront where the rain made the signs paint run. His voice was low, practiced, the kind a magistrate would use in a quiet courthouse. "You should not be walking this late," he said. Olivia kept her back turned a moment longer, listening to the syllables like someone reading the margins of a script. She allowed him the courtesy of a measured silence. Silence made liars reveal themselves by filling in their own details. "You are the Cotton Widow, are you not?" he said after a breath. "They told me you buried a man who refused the easy thing." She did not answer. He adjusted a glove, the sound small in the empty street. "Pity," he said. "It is a strange time for pity. We have use for pity and use for punishment. The line between them is thin. Which side do you walk on, widow?" Her hands tightened on the strap of the boot just enough for him to hear it. Then she stepped forward, and the motion itself was an answer. Forward. "The rain will not hide you forever," he said. "Someone will notice." She kept walking. Each stride was a measure of distance not only in feet, but in stubbornness. The alley shifted and opened into a street that tracked the harbor. Somewhere a bell chimed and was swallowed by dark. She could feel him like the weight of a tide at her back, the city pressing forward into complicity. A patrol crossed their path at the corner, lanterns bobbing like slow moons. Men with polished boots and eyes that had been trained to catch what was out of place scanned the night like nets thrown over water. Olivia tucked her boot inward, the letter pressing at an angle she had not intended. She felt the hinge of a hinge, the moment where nerves might betray training. The patrol's sergeant glanced their way. His face held the worn politeness of a man who had been taught to recognize grief and to mistake it for guilt. He saw a widow. He saw a man who wore no supply of soldiers' impatience, and he saw nothing threatening. The sergeant passed. His eyes skimmed the man behind her, found no uniformed authority, and moved on. The city taught men to look for uniforms and ignore the patterns stitched into ordinary life. The stranger did not move when the patrol passed. He lowered his chin and watched her. There was a sound when he breathed out, almost a gust, and then he spoke as if naming an invoice due. "You carry something," he said. "Something people would die for to possess." Olivia kept her mouth closed. She let his statement hang like wet linen between them. She could answer him honestly and confess to carrying a death sentence in leather. She could tell him it was a list of names, betray the town for a truth she believed in, and risk the lives of people who would never be celebrated for their courage. She could lie and create a decoy story. She could surrender and end the weight in her boot. She let him decide what kind of man he was first. They walked on. The city narrowed to warehouses that smelled of salt and long years. Doors that once opened for sailors now yawned like mouths that had been fed on rumor. Olivia could smell the print of ink in the air a block before she saw the shop. That metallic, slightly sour tang that belonged to letters and lies. The press waited like a patient animal in its cage, knowing that one night could mean a lifetime of consequences. Her boot hit a stone differently. She had learned to step like someone who did not own anything worth stealing. It was an art. She reached the unmarked door of the print shop just as the stranger did as well. He did not push past her. He did not seize the latch. He stopped in the doorway as if he had been invited. Inside, the pressman, Samuel, sat with varnished hands and eyes like maps. He did not look up when she entered. He did not need to. He smelled the rain and the letter by the way a man smelled coffee. The print shop was a living thing with its own habits, a stack of paper in the corner, a press that had the memory of 1,000 lines, typeset in trays like waiting caskets. "If you've been followed, don't close the door," Samuel said, not looking up. Olivia left it open a crack. The stranger stepped in and closed the gap like a book snapping shut. For the first time, Olivia could see him, not the details of his face, his jaw, the scar on his thumb, the clean lines of his coat, but the way he held himself. He seemed less a man than a measure. There was a smallness in him that was neither weakness nor kindness. It was the smallness of a man who had decided to calibrate the cost of everything. "You will have to tell me why you are here," he said. Olivia unlatched her boot slowly and rested the heel on the lip of the table. The letter did not look like paper when freed. It looked like a wound peeled back and asked to heal in someone else's hands. She could see the ink bleed faintly where the rain had kissed the edges. She had to decide then whether to keep the last thing she had, or to trust the print shop where words lived and died. "You hand that to him," the stranger said without preface, pointing to Samuel as if the act of pointing could clear moral cloudy weather. "And you hang half this city." Samuel still did not rise. His hand lay on a tray of type as if to anchor him to the only thing that had ever been his true servant. The press had not asked for allegiances. It had only asked for hands steady enough to set letters so the world could read them. Olivia felt the letter like a heartbeat separating her from choice. Her husband's handwriting slanted the way he had always slanted toward mercy. He had written names and rotes and times in a careful, trembling hand because he had believed that someone else had to be brave when he could not be. "I was told you work with lists," the stranger said. "I was told you print truths." Samuel's face folded like a page. "We print what will be read," he said slowly. "We set type so that ears and hands and eyes might carry it. Why have you come with this?" Olivia lifted the paper and set it on the table, letting the ink breathe like a thing that needed room to be seen. The letter lay there, unremarkable in paper, remarkable in consequence. She did not speak the names. She did not read them aloud. Saying them is what would turn a whisper into a road. "I came because I could not bury it," she said at last, "because burying it felt like burying them." Noah, the man who had stood at the press earlier, who had worked through dawns and dusk, moved then, stepping into the pool of light like a man revealing his purpose. He had been watching, quiet as a shadow made solid. He had put his hand on the press with the habitual tenderness of someone who loved a tool more than most things. He met Olivia's eyes and nodded once, as if to say he knew the cost. The stranger's mouth drew as if he had been given a ledger and did not like the balance. "You cannot spread this like a prayer," he said. "You must understand. If the wrong ear hears, they die. If you distribute it in ink, they will die. If you carry it to men who claim to be the good, they will become monuments you cannot shield." Samuel's shoulders twitched. "And if we do nothing?" he asked. "If we let them die by erasure because paper is dangerous?" Olivia felt the room narrow. 2 men and a widow, and a letter like an accusation between them. The press hummed softly as if listening. Olivia thought of the seamstresses and midwives, of the tailor who stitched pockets into the linings of coats, of the dock worker who knew how to hide a crate of men beneath sugar sacks. She felt each face as if a string ran from her chest to theirs. Her husband had written with the hope that someone with more reach than grief would carry the names to safety. She had walked for that hope. She also felt the ink's sting, how easily names could be read and used like teeth. She could see, in a sudden flash of clarity, how the same list that gave roots could be made into a trap. The Confederacy could hang them for treason. The Union could parade them as heroes and leave them exposed. Nothing on a page could change the hunger of men who sought power. She placed her palms flat on the table, the wood warm from a day of presses. "If paper kills them," she said quietly, "we must teach the city to carry them in ways paper cannot reach." Noah looked at her as if that was a sane thing to say, and then as if he knew exactly what she meant. Samuel's hand tightened on a length of type. The stranger's jaw set. "We can teach," Samuel said, "but teaching takes time, and time is a place men in uniforms will die to occupy." Noah moved closer, and for the first time, the stranger let his voice soften. "And time costs lives," he said. "We cannot afford to spend years teaching when scouts will come tonight." Olivia's heart beat like a small drum. The choice had condensed: protect the list, distribute it intelligently, or erase it and risk losing history for the sake of lives. Each option was a wound of its own making. She folded the paper and slid it back into her boot with a motion that was part prayer and part resignation. "Then we do both," she said. They worked through a night that smelled of oil and wet wood. Samuel set decoy broadsides to confuse, to send patrols chasing ghosts. Noah stitched small linen sacks and marked them with a single knotted thread that meant nothing to soldiers but everything to neighbors. Olivia taught a dozen women a quiet chorus, nothing more than a tune where syllables could be arranged to suggest names. They planned like people disassembling a bomb: where to scatter, who to trust, what to destroy once the work was done. The stranger watched, and sometimes he spoke and sometimes he did not. He had the kind of patience that was not mercy but calculation. When the first decoy was ready, Samuel lit a lamp and set it near the press, sending a glow like a red flag into the street to draw attention away. Noah wrapped the first sack and walked out into the night without a coat, carrying small burdens as if they were nothing. Olivia sang the chorus once, 3 notes into the dark, and the sound carried to a courtyard where a washerwoman had stopped scrubbing and listened. They had bought themselves a sliver of time. It might be an hour, it might be a day, but it was something. The stranger lingered at the doorway. He had watched enough to know that plans were fragile. He had, perhaps, also decided something. He stepped back into the street and, with the casualness of a man who had not yet shown his hand, folded his gloved hands and walked away. Olivia did not watch him go. She watched Noah instead, the steady shape of a man who had been willing to risk the press's life for others. She felt the press like a heart beating under her hands, and she knew that the night had shifted from a place that hid things to a place that kept secrets alive. By morning, the city had already begun to feel the tremor of something it couldn't name. Charleston was a place trained to notice change the way a wounded animal senses weather. Markets opened slower. Conversations thinned. Soldiers who usually leaned on rifles with the laziness of men sure of power now walked in pairs, eyes sharpened against a danger they could not yet describe. The first hymn slipped into the streets as quietly as a rumor. A washerwoman sang it while scrubbing blood from a shirt that didn't belong to her husband. She did not know the meaning of the syllables she repeated. She only knew the widow had sung them with the kind of voice that made you lean closer. By noon, 2 more women hummed the melody without knowing they were holding the first fragments of a map. Olivia watched from a distance, hidden beneath the arch of a doorway. She had not slept. Her dress still smelled of rain, and the inside of her boot still pressed the memory of the letter against her ankle, even though the paper itself was no longer there. A strange thing happens when you carry a burden long enough. Your body keeps it even after the weight is gone. She didn't allow herself to feel relief. Relief was a luxury, and luxuries got people seen. Noah returned from the docks with shoes full of mud and a linen sack missing from his coat. That was the plan. One sack gone meant one more portion of the list had been smuggled into a pocket. A collar, a hymnal, a cradle blanket. Every missing sack was progress. Every missing sack was also a countdown. He entered the print shop and shut the door with his heel. "They're searching boats now," he said. "Not for contraband, just for anything that looks like information." Samuel didn't look up from the press. Information terrifies men who feed on control more than gunpowder ever could. Noah tossed a small cloth bundle onto the table. Inside it was a prayer book, the kind a minister would carry into a field, except the inside seam, hand-stitched in black thread, held 3 syllables. 3 syllables that would mean nothing to anyone unless they had heard the hymn. "That one goes north with the next preacher who asks for repairs," Noah said. "He won't read it. Someone else will." Samuel nodded. "Ink makes truth visible," he said. "Thread makes it disappear until needed." "Useful." Olivia entered last, hair pinned back, eyes hard. "They questioned a baker this morning," she said. "He didn't know anything. That didn't help him." Samuel froze. "How bad?" "They emptied his shelves, turned out his pockets, left him with flour in the air, and no answers." The baker's wife arrived before sunset, breathless, holding a loaf split open down the middle. "They'll come back," she said. "They always come back when they don't like the silence." Inside the bread, hidden beneath the crust, was a scrap of cloth sewn with a single knot, one of Noah's sacks. It had been planted meant for someone else, but the patrol had arrived first. "They didn't find it," she said. "But they will. They'll come back with dogs next time." Olivia took the bread as if it were a wounded child. "We'll move it. Tonight." The wife lowered her voice. "My husband said, if they take him again, he won't come back." There was no threat in her voice. Just a fact, like weather. That night, the patrols changed formation. Lanterns moved like restless stars, sweeping alley to alley. Soldiers no longer ignored windows, they studied them. A single candle left lit now looked like a signal. A closed door looked like a secret. Olivia, Noah, and Samuel met in the back room of the print shop, where the press still smelled of burned type. "We scatter what's left," Noah said. "Clean, quiet, no gaps." Samuel shook his head. "Not enough time." "They're not hunting evidence, they're hunting patterns." Olivia looked up sharply. "Patterns can be broken." "How?" Samuel asked. "By turning them into noise." She gestured to the hymn sheet Samuel had drafted. "If one city sings one version, they'll trace it. If 10 streets sing 10 versions, they'll drown trying to decide which one is real." Noah smirked. "Turn the truth into static." "Turn the truth into mass memory," Olivia corrected. "Memory doesn't burn." The first arrest came 2 days later. Not the baker, not a runaway, not a resistor. A child. A boy no older than 9 caught humming the tune while skipping stones near the fort wall. A guard dragged him by the collar, thinking the melody a code. The boy couldn't even spell the word confession, much less give one. When Olivia heard, something inside her shifted. Not broke, shifted. Like a bone deciding whether to heal straight or crooked. "We stop," Samuel said. "Before worse comes." "We can't stop," Olivia replied. "Stopping turns the names into targets anyway. The only safety is scale." Noah looked at her, understanding the resolve that had made her walk through rain with death in her boot. "Then we scale," he said. "But we don't do it alone. They built the next stage of the network not with paper, not with ink, but with people who were already invisible. The laundress who handled the soldiers' uniforms. The gravedigger who buried what the city didn't want to remember. The night ferry oarsman no one tipped but everyone needed. The nurse who knew how to lie about causes of death. Each one received a verse. Not a full hymn, not a full name, just a syllable pattern and a rhythm, so small it could hide in a hum. Olivia watched the way they received it. Some nodded, some trembled, some cried without sound. Every person added increased the chance of betrayal, but also the chance the list would live, even if she didn't. It happened at dusk. A lantern knocked over, a door broken in, the heavy stomp of boots. They didn't come for Samuel. They didn't come for Noah. They didn't even come for the baker. They came for the seamstress. The woman who had sewn the first pocket. The woman who had stitched silence into cotton. The woman who had never sung the hymn aloud, but had worn it in her work. They accused her of aiding fugitives. They tore her shop apart. They dragged her into the street and demanded names. She did not speak. They broke her fingers. She still did not speak. Olivia watched from a doorway, rage pounding like a second heart. Noah had to hold her back. Samuel stood behind them, eyes gone to stone. "We started this," Olivia said. "We did this to her." "No," Noah said. "The war did this. We just refused to let it eat alone." The captain raised a pistol and aimed it at the seamstress's head. The captain's pistol hovered in the air, like a question that had already chosen its answer. The seamstress knelt on the stones, blood dripping from hands that had once sewn safety into pockets no one was meant to notice. Her fingers were swollen, bent wrong, still trembling with the muscle memory of her craft. The watchers in the street looked away, because looking directly at cruelty makes you responsible for what follows. Olivia didn't move. Noah held her back with a grip that wasn't force, just realism. Samuel stood behind them, every vein in his jaw pulsing like a line of type hammered too hard into metal. The seamstress lifted her head. She didn't beg, didn't tremble. She just looked at the captain the way a mother looks at a child she no longer fears. He took that calm as defiance. He pulled the hammer back, and the world held still long enough for Olivia to realize something. If she didn't act now, the hymn would die inside the mouths of the dead. The gun fired, but not where the captain intended. A brick shattered behind him, exploding into dust against the wall. A second shot followed, this one from the dark, not meant to kill, meant to interrupt. Shouting erupted. Soldiers turned, boots scrambled. The captain swore and ducked. Olivia didn't run. She ran toward the seamstress. Noah was right behind her. Samuel too, though his body was built more for ink than sprinting. They reached the kneeling woman before the soldiers could decide whether to fire or retreat. Olivia grabbed her under the arms. Noah shielded them. Samuel stood between the soldiers and the retreat, an old man with nothing but posture and defiance. "Move," Noah hissed. "Now, before command remembers it has bullets." The seamstress could barely stand, but she walked, not because her body allowed it, but because pride refused to fall in the street where fear watched. A third shot rang out, this one from panic, not aim. It grazed Samuel's shoulder. He flinched, but did not fall. They reached the print shop and barred the door. Noah shoved crates against the entrance. Olivia helped the seamstress into a chair, fingers shaking, not from fear but from fury, still looking for a target. Samuel pressed cloth to his wound, teeth clenched. "They know," Noah said. "Not who, not how many, but they know something is being built under their feet. They won't stop at suspicion anymore," Samuel replied. "They'll start raiding houses, pulling children from beds. They'll hunt patterns, not proof." Olivia didn't answer. She stared at the blood blooming through the cloth on Samuel's shoulder. Ink and blood always looked too similar under low light. "It changes now," she said, voice steady. "We don't just hide the names anymore. We weaponize them." Noah looked at her. "How?" "By making sure the story spreads faster than the soldiers. If they take one person, the hymn moves to 10 more. If they silence one voice, the rest will sing louder. We stopped treating this like a secret network. And start treating it like a revolution made of whispers. Samuel finished. The seamstress lifted her head. "If they take me again," she said, voice frayed but alive, "don't save me. Just keep sewing." By dawn, Charleston was no longer a city. It was a field of pressure waiting for ignition. Patrols doubled, rumors sharpened. A pamphlet appeared overnight accusing unnamed citizens of aiding fugitives through coded song. It wasn't wrong, but it wasn't accurate enough to stop anything. The captain didn't return to the seamstress's shop. He didn't have to. He wanted someone bigger. Samuel's wound forced their hand. The print shop could no longer stay where it was. Too visible, too remembered, too central. "We move the press," Noah said. Samuel almost laughed. "You don't move a printing press. A printing press is a building." "Not tonight," Olivia said. "Tonight it's a ghost." They dismantled it in silence. Bolts, plates, rollers, type cases, all wrapped in cloth lined with sawdust to muffle sound. The press that had printed lies, receipts, and now salvation, vanished into crates that looked like furniture. "Where will it go?" Samuel asked. "Where no one asks what a crate weighs," Noah answered. "The docks." "And after that?" Samuel pressed. "After that," Olivia said, "it will print in every place that still has a voice left." The first betrayal didn't come from an enemy. It came from fear. A man who had carried one verse of the hymn panicked when he heard of the child's arrest. He didn't speak names, but he burned the cloth pocket he'd been given. Fire turned thread to ash in seconds, but fear has smoke. And smoke has a way of being smelled. A patrol followed the trail to an alley, then to a house, then to a woman who had nothing to do with the network. They dragged her into the square and asked questions she couldn't answer. The hymn had started to protect the nameless, but now the nameless were being crucified by proximity. Olivia watched from the edge of the crowd and understood something brutal but true. A movement that stays quiet, dies quiet. A movement that spreads gets blood on its hands. Noah returned from the harbor covered in sweat and salt. "The press is loaded," he said. "By sunrise it will be on a boat heading north." Samuel exhaled like a man whose ribs had been carrying a house. But Olivia didn't look relieved. "They aren't after the press anymore," she said. "They're after the story, and if they can't find the list, they'll make one. They'll invent names and hang them anyway." Noah nodded slowly. "So what do we do now?" Olivia didn't blink. "We stop trying to save everyone." Samuel stared. "And do what instead?" "We save the future," she said, "even if the present has to bleed for it." Silence pooled like dark water. Noah understood first. "You're talking about escalation." "I'm talking about inevitability," Olivia said. "They think they can end us before we speak. So we speak, louder than they can kill." The seamstress, hand bandaged, looked at Olivia with something like reverence. "Then teach us the next verse," she whispered. By the third week, the city woke like a house that knew someone was inside. Doors opened slower. Voices pitched lower. Patrols stopped pretending to be casual. They moved like a metronome of threat. Left, right, turn, pause, measuring the streets for courage they meant to crush. The rumor that had been smoke became a torch. Somewhere in Charleston a list existed, and if it did not exist, men with polished boots would invent one to satisfy the story they preferred. The seamstress kept working with splinted fingers, each stitch a refusal to confess a language she never spoke. Noah's routes multiplied, shorter, riskier, more unpredictable. Samuel hid his wound beneath a clean shirt and kept setting decoys even though the press now lived in crates on a boat crawling north along dark water. Olivia slept in minutes, not hours. Her widow's dress traded for a worker's coat that did not declare grief, only grit. At dusk, an officer posted a notice in the square, nails punching through paper with theatrical care. Any gathering after curfew would be treated as conspiracy. Any singing would be treated as code. Any hymn heard outside church walls would be prosecuted as sedition. The print used sedition as if the city would be flattered to be accused of it. A boy read the notice aloud to a cluster of women who pretended not to listen. The word landed like a rung of a ladder the city would have to climb or burn. The trap arrived as mercy always does in a war, wearing its cousin's face. A chaplain with government papers came to the quarter bearing a promise of safe worship. One night only. Hymns aloud. A service for the grieving poor. Men who had spent weeks outlawing music now invited it. That meant someone wanted to count throats and mark faces under lantern light. Noah brought the news to the back room where Olivia was binding small pockets to inner seams with the seamstress's stubborn hands guiding her. "It's bait," he said. "Bait works when hunger is honest," Samuel replied. "And grief is always hungry." Olivia looked at the little stack of sacks. "We go anyway." Noah blinked. "We? If they assemble a choir of suspects," she said, "we make it a choir of witnesses. If they think they can harvest the hymn, we give them 10 versions until their intelligence chokes on it." Samuel stared at the floorboards, remembering the oil and sawdust he had used to swallow the press's smell. "Public means evidence. Public means proof," Olivia said, "and proof cuts 2 ways. The chapel was a gutted warehouse broomed clean and christened with a cross nailed crooked to a beam. Soldiers lined the side walls, rifles idle in hands that did not know prayer. The chaplain smiled the way a ledger smiles, pleasant until the numbers failed to please. He invited the poor to sing. He invited God to listen. He invited informers to feel righteous. Olivia entered with the laundresses. Noah stood near the door with dockmen who looked like they had been carved from rope. Samuel moved to the back pew, hat in hand, ordinary as a receipt. The chaplain chose the first hymn, a familiar melody that carried no secret. People sang. The soldiers relaxed a fraction. Then he invited requests from the congregation. That was the opening. Olivia didn't raise her hand. She raised her voice. A soft refrain, nothing alarming, nothing coded to an untrained ear. The seamstress picked it up, as did the gravedigger, and then the ferry oarsman. A harmony formed not by plan, but by long practice of doing the right thing when no one would praise you for it. The chaplain's smile tightened. He could hear something he couldn't write down. He nodded to the captain. Rifles tilted, just enough to prove the ceiling understood gravity. The captain stepped forward, boots ringing on wood. "A fine tune," he said. "Where did you learn it?" Silence tried to form, but Olivia denied it air. "From grief," she answered. "The city has been teaching." "Names," the captain said, tasting the word. "We think it carries names." "Everything worth singing carries names," Samuel called from the back, voice rough as type metal. "That is why men fear songs more than sermons." A few heads turned. The chaplain glanced toward the captain. "Now?" "Not yet," the captain's eyes said. "Let them speak themselves into the noose." The chaplain raised both hands. "If there is nothing to hide, sing it again," he invited. "Louder, so heaven can hear." He wanted a ledger. He got a flood. The laundresses sang. The dockmen hummed. The gravedigger's bass rolled like dirt over a coffin. A child near the aisle, the same age as the boy taken by the fort, found courage and added a thin ribbon of sound. The hymn multiplied into versions of itself. Olivia's plan, 3 keys at once, 2 different accents on the inner syllables, a weave of melodies that refused to settle into one code. The soldiers frowned. Which line to track? Which mouth to stop? The captain picked the simplest answer. All. "Cease," the captain barked. They didn't. He nodded, and the first rifle cracked thunder inside the room. No bullet flew. It was a blank, a roar meant to teach obedience. Half the room flinched. The other half sang louder, because some fears only know how to grow. Noah's hand brushed Olivia's elbow, not to pull her back, to steady her forward. The captain raised his palm again. "Take the men," he told his soldiers. "The women can repent later." Rifles swung, muzzles pointing at chests that smelled of riverwork and rope. A soldier seized Samuel by the arm. The old printer did not jerk away. He looked the boy in the face like he was a typesetter who'd mixed letters and needed instructing. "Son," Samuel said, calm as a margin note, Do you know how to fix a line when it's set wrong?" The boy blinked. "You break it," Samuel said, and smashed his hat into the rifle barrel, jolting it toward the floor as Noah lunged to intercept the second soldier. The room erupted. Not chaos, but refusal. People moved like water that had memorized a channel. A shot went off for real this time. Samuel grunted. He stayed standing for a heartbeat, eyes wide with surprise at the body's sudden betrayal, then folded, a man becoming a stack of paper giving in to gravity. Everything slowed. The sound of the hymn narrowed to a single raw thread that refused to break. Olivia knelt beside Samuel. Blood bloomed through his shirt, dark as ink in a tray. He tried to speak. Breath stole the consonants. "Don't set," he whispered. "Don't set what?" Olivia asked, but she knew. Don't set type for elegies. Set type for orders. He touched her wrist, fingers leaving a print like a seal. "Burn it," he managed. She understood now. Not the hymn, not the people, not the roots that had already become memory. The last decoy manifests, the ones Samuel had been storing to mislead raids, the ones close enough to truth to get innocents killed if captured. Those had to die before he did. Noah dragged a bench against advancing soldiers, buying seconds. The seamstress, splints and all, bit a soldier's sleeve like a mother dog saving a pup. The chaplain fled for the side door, righteousness molting into fear. Olivia stood. The room seemed to tilt under the choice. She ran. Not away, from, not toward, to. Out the back, down the corridor that still smelled faintly of oil and sawdust from nights they had hidden the press's scent. A storage room waited, stacked with crates and the last of Samuel's dangerous paper. Lists that almost told the truth, maps that almost protected. Enough, almost, to get 100 people killed by men who preferred easy answers. She struck a match. The flame licked her knuckles like an animal testing a hand. The oil caught, the sawdust surrendered with a sigh. Behind her the hymn swelled again. Not a melody now, but a force, a pressure pushing back at rifles. She fed the fire carefully, not like a pyromaniac, but like a midwife, guarding a birth that could not be undone once begun. The blaze read the room faster than ink ever could. Crates breathed, then cracked. Smoke unrolled thick and low. The paper blackened, curled, and tried to speak its last words before becoming ash. Olivia whispered a name into the flame. Not a martyr's, not a hero's. Her husband's. The man whose gentle hand had written the master. The man who had taught her that mercy must learn to be cunning or die humble. When she turned, a soldier blocked the doorway, rifle lifted. "Stop," he said, but it came out confused, as if the word had not been trained to address women who stood inside fire. She stepped forward until the heat's aura wrapped them both. "You first," she said, and he took an involuntary step back, eyes watering, instinct cutting across orders. She came back into the chapel shoulder first, bracing for the recoil of a city-changing shape. The hymn had transformed from song into sound, the kind that pushes air hard enough to shift a decision. People were not attacking. They were refusing to stop being loud. Noah knelt over Samuel, face grimed with dust and something like prayer. The old printer's chest lifted shallowly. His eyes caught Olivia's and held, asking a question he already knew the answer to. "It's gone," she told him. Every dangerous lie that looked like truth. He exhaled, a small laugh caught in hurt. Then, "Print. In mouths," he said, the ghost of a smile in the corner that had once critiqued spacing. Samuel's gaze slid toward the rafters, toward beams that had heard more sin than repentance. He tried to say one more thing. It didn't arrive. The captain shouted for the room to clear or be cleared. His order sounded thinner than it had an hour ago. He had a body at his feet and a city in front of him that had decided breathing together was safer than obeying apart. Olivia stood and faced him. Smoke curled behind her like a cloak. She was still a widow, But something else had been added, custodian maybe, witness, builder. The boot that once carried the master now carried only char and resolve. This is sedition, the captain said, pointing at the crowd. This is memory, Olivia answered. You can outlaw it, but you cannot police it. He raised his pistol again, at her, at the ceiling, at the problem he could not shoot. The chorus rose, not the coded version, not the careful weave. A plain, brutal melody that every living throat knew from childhood. The soldiers hesitated. Some shifted. One lowered his rifle an inch, the way a hand lowers a tool when it remembers what it could be used for, other than breaking. The captain looked to the chaplain for support. The chaplain looked at the floor. A bell rang outside. One of the dock bells, clanged by a dockman who had no idea he was about to start a riot or end one. The sound sliced the air, joined the hymn, turned the room into a box that could not hold what it contained. The captain did not shoot. He holstered the pistol, not from mercy but from math. Too many witnesses, too many bodies to drag, too many versions of the story already in flight. Arrests will be made, he said, retreat wrapped as threat. The law will not be mocked. You are not the law, Noah said quietly. You are its uniform. The soldiers withdrew in a slow, angry tide, leaving behind a smear of blood and a problem they could not solve without making it worse. Olivia sank beside Samuel and closed his eyes with 2 fingers inked by smoke. The seamstress laid a strip of torn hem over his chest. Noah touched the wooden pew as if it were a press plate cooling after a long run. They did not say goodbye. They set objectives. Tomorrow, Olivia said. Sacks to the North Quarter. Verses to the hospital basement. A simple version for children that carries nothing but a habit of singing. And tonight? Noah asked. Tonight we make sure everyone knows exactly what happened here, Olivia said, before someone with paper tells them something cleaner. The city did not sleep after the chapel. Not because it was afraid, because it was awake. The hymn traveled like heat through wood, finding cracks, running under doors, warming the places law never bothered to search. Patrols doubled, then tripled. Officers who once walked with confidence now scanned every mouth as if sound itself were contraband. By sunrise, the captain had new orders. Not arrest the singers, not hunt the names, but crush the story. A single story, repeated loud enough, could turn the powerless into a crowd and the crowd into a verdict. He didn't need to hang the whole city, just the right symbol. A widow, a worker, a man who printed lies, a child who hummed too loudly, anyone who could be made into a headline. So he issued a decree under a forged seal. All citizens suspected of spreading seditious melody would be detained for evaluation. Not trial, not sentencing. Evaluation. The kind of word that lets men do anything to the bodies it touches. Olivia and Noah met in the old tannery, where the air smelled of leather, lye, and choices that had to hurt to work. The crates that once held the press now held hundreds of hand-copied verses, stitched, written, whispered, scratched into bark, rubbed into flour sacks with charcoal so light it could be washed away unless someone knew to soak it instead. We're running out of safe places, Noah said. They're marking houses by night, chalk X on the doors. Families wake up already condemned. And the song? Olivia asked. It's everywhere, he said. Too many variations to track. That's good. But they don't need to track it anymore. They just need to kill what people think it means. Olivia nodded slowly. Then we make it mean something they can't replace. How? Noah asked. By making sure it doesn't need us. They didn't hold the evaluation in a prison. They held it in the market square, public, deliberate, stage-managed. Soldiers dragged out 10 people at random. Not the ones involved, just the ones nearby. A gravedigger, a schoolgirl, an old man who had carried water through every summer since before the war, a mother with a baby still nursing. The captain stood on the platform like a man posing for a portrait. This is what sedition does, he announced. It poisons the innocent with ideas. The crowd didn't shout, didn't protest. It watched. That was worse. The captain lifted a sheet of paper and read fake names, names he had invented, names that meant nothing, but sounded enough like truth to be sold to the frightened. "This list," he said, "was found in a print shop." Samuel's ghost seemed to rise between the boards. Noah looked at Olivia. "He's rewriting the story. He's trying," she said, "but we print in mouths now. Let's see if he can burn that." The captain raised his pistol. "This ends now," he said. "You want to sing? Then sing as ghosts." But before he pulled the trigger, a sound rose. Not loud, not many, just one woman. The seamstress. She sang one syllable, broken finger, broken voice, unbroken will. Then a child joined. A dockman, a washerwoman, a midwife with blood still under her nails. The melody spread like breath on glass, impossible to grab, impossible to silence. The captain fired into the air, once, twice, but the sound only cut space for the hymn to fill. The soldiers hesitated, not because they had hearts, but because they had ears. And the ear is the fastest traitor a tyrant ever meets. A single voice can be crushed. 100 cannot be aimed at. 1,000 cannot be documented. The captain shouted for arrests. No one moved. Noah stepped forward first, not as leader, not as hero, but as participant. He placed himself between the condemned and the rifles. Then a ferryman joined him, then a teacher, then a boy who had once skipped stones and been punished for humming. No weapon, no shield, just bodies arranged in the shape of refusal. The captain realized something too late. The crowd wasn't protecting the 10 prisoners. The crowd was declaring itself the list. Olivia watched the moment the captain understood. The names he wanted to erase had dissolved into thousands of replacements. The list was no longer paper. It was a city-shaped choir. The captain lowered his gun just an inch. Fear, for the first time, was on his side of the equation. A soldier stepped forward, hand shaking, gun lowered. He wasn't a hero. He was just done. Done killing strangers for orders he didn't write. Done arresting people who sang instead of stabbed. Done watching law behave like hunger. He dropped the rifle. The sound of it hitting stone was louder than the blank fired in the chapel. Another soldier followed, then a third. Not a mutiny, a fracture, cracks in the wall holding the city still. The captain saw the future in that sound, a future where history would write his name. As the man who shot into a crowd that refused to obey, he holstered his weapon. Not mercy, calculation. He turned to leave, and that is when Olivia stepped forward. "You can bury truth," she said, "but you cannot outlive a song." The captain did not answer. He didn't need to. His silence was the signature of a defeated man. The 10 arrested were released. The crowd dispersed in a silence that wasn't fear, but an aftershock. People didn't cheer, they didn't dance, they just absorbed what had happened. The moment a city realized it could refuse, but Samuel wasn't there to see it. The press was gone, the decoys were ash, the master list was memory, the danger was still alive. Nothing was safe, only worth it. Olivia returned to the tannery with Noah. The seamstress lay resting, hands wrapped, voice raw. "Did it work?" she asked. "It didn't fail," Olivia answered. "That's enough for now." Noah touched Olivia's shoulder. "The story's already spreading. Dock towns will hear it by winter." "And the soldiers?" she asked. "They'll come again," he said. "But now they know the city isn't a cage, it's a choir." That night, Olivia walked alone along the harbor, where she had once carried a letter in her boot. The paper was gone. The man who wrote it was gone. The printer who preserved it was gone. But she was not walking with loss. She was walking with distribution. The hymn echoed from a distant alley. Another version rose from a boat rocking in the tide. A child whistled its wrong notes and still somehow got it right. The list had survived by ceasing to be a list. It had become untraceable permission. She closed her eyes, not to mourn, to remember. Charleston never carved a statue for Olivia Ward. No plaque named Samuel as a printer of forbidden memory. No battlefield preserved Noah's footprints. That was the point. They did not build a monument. They built a pattern. The soldiers eventually left. The law rewrote itself. The city pretended it had never needed to be brave. But the hymn stayed. Not in churches, not in books. In work songs, river chants, children's games. Versions that no historian could decode, yet every survivor could feel. Somewhere along the river, a sack with a knotted seam still hangs in a pantry. Somewhere in a field, a farmer still hums the wrong notes in the right order. Somewhere in a schoolyard, a child claps a rhythm that once hid a name no document ever printed. And somewhere in the quiet of an attic, a widow's boot still rests, empty now, but shaped by the memory of what it once carried. The list did not save everyone. The song did not stop the war. But it did something the war could never undo. It proved that the smallest act, a pocket sewn, a verse shared, a page burned on purpose, can outlive bullets, uniforms, and even history's laziness. There are stories written to be remembered, and there are stories built to be repeated. This one chose repetition, not because it was perfect, but because it refused to die. And as long as someone, somewhere, hums a melody that once held a name, the list still lives.